I was just waiting and let a few more people get on. I did hear from, before we get started, everyone, I did hear from Yolanda Brown, who had an emergency come up. Mr. Weeks is ill, and Dr. Wanza has a graduation that she must attend. So we want to thank everyone for joining. I'm sure there'll be others that will continue to join. Let us, Mr. Walker, who is the other Michael Walker that's on there?
I'm not aware of another Michael Walker. Oh, perhaps my coworker, I forwarded the email to sign on as a backup for the data discussion. So perhaps
Okay.
using my link, that would be the
Yeah,
only.
yeah. That's probably not going to be necessary because since we just got it, so that's okay. All right. Thank you all for joining and welcome. Let's start with the roll call. So we'll do self-introductions. If you will introduce yourselves, don't be shy.
Michael Bell, Community-Based Connection.
Thank you, sir.
Kelly Gaines, Faith Community.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Geis.
Colonel David Holmes, Broward County Sheriff's Office.
Thank you, Colonel.
Alona Holmes on behalf of the NAACP.
Thank
Ella
you,
Phillips, DJJ Advisory.
Thank you, Ms. Phillips.
Gloria Michella on behalf of the State Attorney's Office, AKA Yolanda Brown. It's how I got her identification today.
Okay, you're in disguise. All right, trying to get Yamika on.
Major Victor London, Fort Lauderdale Police Department.
Thank you, Major.
David Watkins, Broward County Schools.
Hey, good afternoon, everyone. John James with the Broward County Public Defender's Office.
Thank you.
Michael Walker, Broward County Schools.
Good afternoon, Cassandra Evans, Florida Department of Juvenile Justice.
Good afternoon, Tori Boudreau with the Florida Department of Juvenile Justice, Office of Prevention Services.
Johnny Sanders, Florida Department of Juvenile Justice, Office of Prevention Services.
Judge Carlos Rabeau, I'm a juvenile delinquency judge now for 9 years.
Thank you, Judge. And I believe you were just real unopposed, so congratulations. I'm sorry, I interrupted somebody. Please say again.
That was just me. Hello, Andrea, Broward Legislative Delegation.
Oh, you say just you? Okay. All right. I'm just double checking for attendees on the other side. Brought David over. Tamika, since you are declining to, hopefully you're better. I'll do allow to talk. So when you're ready, just unmute there. When it's your turn. Okay. Let us be reminded of our norms. Let's see who's in the chat. Okay, got Mr. Watkins. Cell phones on silent or vibrate. Raise your digital hand if you wish to speak. Maximum of 3 minutes unless you're doing a presentation. We're going to respect all persons' opinions and viewpoints. And we will address all board members and guests respectfully. We will go back to, as you all know, I was away on NAACP business last week. And Judge Holmes, if you will share school-based arrest. I know that the one thing was we were supposed to get the information earlier than an hour before today's meeting. So if you will share, and I do believe Mr. Walker had an explanation, but tell us where we left off there, please.
All right. Well, good afternoon, all again, and thank you, Madam Chair, for allowing me to sit in on your behalf. We had an extensive presentation presentation by the Broward School Board members that were present. And we had asked for certain statistical data from them. My request was that they would provide that to you well before today's meeting. I just myself received your email with the information. So I don't know if it's all there, if it's everything that we asked for. So, Mr. Walker, you wanna, was it that hard to find? It's just so.
Yes, I want to start off with a formal apology with the delay and gathering the data. And it's really important for me to make sure that we're fully transparent and I'm providing accurate and the most meaningful data possible. Unfortunately, I'm sure you're aware we are going through some restructuring, and some key people that can pull this data and I would collaborate with were out the entire week. So I was able to pull some of the data, but it did require some collaboration to make sure that everything I got is accurate and meaningful. So I'm committed to ongoing reporting whenever possible. And I realized that this was not ideal to get it the final report on such short notice. I am prepared to explain it. And David and myself are definitely willing to continue providing updates as needed whenever necessary. So my full apologies for the delay with the data.
I think we would probably be in the same predicament as we were before, having not had an opportunity to review it and ask questions. I guess we can hear from everyone else on their thoughts that have had an opportunity to get it and review it. I would, Ms. Chief Evans, I know that you were on the, I'm not sure, I have like 5 emails for you. I'm not sure if any of them are right. I sent it over from my personal email as opposed to Constant Contact. I know we had some problems there. What I would like if you would review on your end and see how closely, if at all, that it matches what you have. In the past, we've gotten data from the district that was nowhere near the last time we did this. It was actually about 1,400 arrests off of what DJJ reported. And so we would lesser than, and I'm not going to say that the numbers were skewed under Dave Galt and other people, but I'm going to say the numbers were skewed that came from the district. So I'd like to, DJJ's data has proven to be much more reliable than what we have received from the district for whatever reason. Even if there was a concern about whether it was actually school-based or not, Chief Evans has been able to certainly explain how they got to the data that they got and what is being classified as. So I'd like to, based on what you were able to see last month, I know we just sent you this, Chief. What are your thoughts as far as what you have thus far?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I did have an opportunity to preview the data with Mr. Walker, and while I did not do a crosswalk in comparison between the two data sets, it's inclusive of the department's data as well as the local data. So it looks on this presentation to be accurate because their data is a subset of ours. And so, so like I said, Mr. Walker and I did go through the data together. I can do a crosswalk to see the comparison between the two, the level of, I guess, how much it complements one another. But I do believe that the data set that's in the PowerPoint is worthy of just a quick presentation, just to kind of ballpark it, because he does do a cross comparison between the two. So I will have to take some time to get it, honestly. Mm-hmm.
Okay, Mr. Walker, are you prepared to do a quick comparison between the two?
Absolutely.
Okay. Proceed.
Okay,
Thank you, sir.
Let me, I think I need the rights to share. I think you're on mute.
put your hand up, Mr. Walker, so I can see which Mr. Walker is actually you, because since there were two.
Okay. Forgive me with my lack of familiarity with Zoom. I'm much better with Teams, but I will attempt to get it going here. Can you all see my screen? No, not yet.
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
Yes.
Let me go to the file here. Okay. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and begin with the presentation. And like Chief Evans has mentioned, I have provided a crosswalk in comparison of the DJJ data versus the data that we collect. And I'll give an explanation as to how we collect it versus how it's reported to the state. So I'm going to go ahead and go to the first report. So this data that in this graph is actually, I'm sorry, can you guys hear me? Or you can't see it?
Screen is still showing Zoom
Yeah.
and not the.
Okay, hold on. Let me, I think I have to pause here. Hold on 1 second. Can you guys see it now?
No.
Continues to pause. Let's see. Here. How about now? All right. So
Yes.
here, okay, so the screen that you're seeing here was pulled from the Department of Juvenile Justice data, and it shows a representation of the school-based arrest. If you notate in the corner, you can select which type of arrest, and we selected school arrests. And you can see in 2016-17, there were 316 overall arrests, 335 the following year, 2018, 441. And then let's see, my screen is blocked. And then obviously the COVID year of 2021, there was only 42. In the further upcoming slides, you will be able to see the data that we collected for this current school year. On the following slide, I have a breakdown as reported arrests in the Department of Juvenile Justice year by year, and it's broken down by school. So if you look at this chart in front of you, this is from the year 2016-17, because I was asked to go back and pull some data pre-MSD. And it is ranking like the schools, not obviously all the schools are not here, but it starts with the highest number of arrests down to the lowest. So if you see the #1 school in the year 2016-17 was Coconut Creek, and then followed by Piper, Plantation, Boyd Anderson, Parkway, Southwood, and so on. I will continue on with the upcoming years so you can see a comparison. This is the 17-18 school year. The #1 school that particular year was Dillard, followed by Coconut Creek, Piper, Boyd Anderson, Margate, Northeast. The 18-19 school year, the first school was actually Cooper City, then Piper, Western, Parkway, Plantation, Boyd, and then Coconut Creek is there around 6th or 7th again. Going into the 1920, Coconut Creek is back on top again with 19 total arrests. Hollywood Hills, Cross Creek. If you'll notice, there's not a strong pattern of schools. Obviously, I know in the previous meetings we have discussed Coconut Creek frequently, but it seems that there's not a set pattern for high schools in the top 5 over the last 5 or 6 years. but Coconut Creek is consistently there. And there's a few other schools in the top 10 that are repetitive, as you can see. The 2021 school year, obviously this data, the kids were not back in school, so there's not very many arrests there. But as you can see in the chart in the bottom corner, when we refer to race, it's consistently a much larger number for Black and Hispanic as opposed to white arrests. And you will see that in our data as well. I'm going to go ahead. So this is Broward County's collection of data. The difference, excuse me, sorry. This is a summary of all arrests that we recorded in our discipline management system. So this is user entered. This is not the data that's entered into the juvenile justice website. This is the data that we report when we have an incident at the school and a school-based administrator witnesses an arrest and there were a disciplinary incident and it required an arrest or had an arrest. That's the data that we collect. So this data will vary from what's actually in the system because what you see in the juvenile justice system is obviously input by a law enforcement officer. So as you know, sometimes there's what appears to be an arrest made and it ends up there was no charges filed or it wasn't entered as it didn't turn into an arrest. So the numbers we have vary a little bit for that reason and a few others. I took our data back to 2014 and you can see we have arrest, non-custodial arrest, and civil citations. Let's move this out of the way, so the numbers. Starting with 2014, we have 81 just straight up arrests, 184 each year, 123, 142. This year has been an issue with our data collection. 2018 was a year that our data was breached and we have had difficulty pulling it. But if you refer back to the slide for 2017-18, I did pull the data from the juvenile justice website. So we do have accurate arrest numbers as reported to the state. Unfortunately, in our DMS system, that particular year, accurate data is not coming out. So I highlighted that to be transparent to show that our DMS system had an issue with that year. If you look at the 18-19 school year, there was 283 arrests. So that's a major uptick from what I could see from the previous years prior to MSD. 192 for 2020, obviously 2021 was low. And then year to date, this particular school year, we have recorded 210 arrests, 169 non-custodial arrests, and 101 civil citations. You can see the breakdowns, gender. We have obviously a larger number of males. And then in alignment with the state's data, you can see that Black and Hispanic groups are much larger consistently throughout the years than the other and white class race. We here have the level breakdown as well, elementary, middle, and high. You'll notice that you see 480 overall arrests and citations, but when you go down into the breakdowns of gender and race, you'll see less. I believe that's due to the fact that there are students who are repeat offenders. So that number varies due to that. I was also, someone mentioned promise data, and I thought it was important to share our promise data. So here you can see the number of promise incidents over the last years, all the way back to 2014. You see the first 2 years, it was close to 3,000. In the last 5 or 6 years, it's pretty consistently been around 1,000 or a little over 1,000 promise incidents. So that's our collection. We're consistent or continuously analyzing this data. we're looking at programs and avenues that we can use to work with the schools. Now that we're overly analyzing this data, we can pinpoint some of those schools that have high numbers of arrests and start looking at what programs, or not start, but continue looking at programs that we can provide in an effort to do some prevention work to stop and reduce some of these arrests. So that's the data that we have, and I'm definitely open to questions.
Mr. Walker, what is the overall percentage of Black and Hispanic children? What's of the population, the total? I don't know how many you have now, if it's still 200,000 or whatever, of that total population. What percentage of that is Black and what's Hispanic?
I'm going to have to look at the demographics and pull that up for you to make sure that I give you a good number, but maybe David, if you might know that answer.
I can give you raw numbers and percentage. So the raw number of Black students, Black or African American in the district, is 106,000. The raw number of Hispanic students, regardless of race, but is 94,000. And the number of non-Hispanic white students in the district is 37,000. That's about 40% Black or African American. That is about 36% Hispanic, and it's about 15% non-Hispanic white.
Thank you. Other questions? I have a question for Major London. Fort Lauderdale police had a practice, and I don't know if they still do, that's what I'm going to ask, of say if a student was accused of committing a crime, they knew that the student was probably going to be at their school, and then rather than chasing the kid or going around, if they went there and the kid wasn't home, that they would go to that school and pick up the children. Is that still a practice of Fort Lauderdale Police Department?
I can't speak to that, but I could research it and get back to you.
Okay, that would be great. Colonel, is that a practice of BSO?
Sorry, Madam President. No, I have not heard of that practice at all. I will do some research as well, but I've never heard of that.
Okay, if you will verify, I know for a fact that that was a practice of Fort Lauderdale under the previous, about 4 regimes ago. I think it even started under Frank, quite frankly, and they would laugh and say it was easier that way, but that also elevated school-based arrests because the alleged crime happened out in the community, and so it would reflect in the data as well. What is your policy on issuing civil citations in the schools, either Mr. Walker or Mr. Watkins?
We, as a practice, the administrators are taught to refer to consultation with law enforcement. They make the final determination as to arrests unless a promise incident, and then we do consult with law enforcement. However, the administrator would assign them to promise. But typically anything that civil citation or arrest, it's consultation with law enforcement.
So that doesn't answer my question. What I'm getting at is that the district had a policy under Mr. Runcie that if the law enforcement, if after he or she examined the situation, talked to everyone, and the decision was to arrest, that was going to be the only decision. Then the ask would be, well, would you consider civil citation rather than arrest? It was only as a civil citation was not meant to be a school-based program within the district. That's what we had promised for. Only with the only if the officer had intended, made the decision to arrest, then that's when the administration would say, well, would you consider civil citation? One of the problems, and I did speak to Dr. Cartwright about this, one of the things that happened in Orange County is that civil citation became the go-to for discipline of children in Orange County school districts, rather than going through the other processes of, say, is it a promise, or is it something, does it arise to something that we want the kid arrested to? And I've looked at your numbers, they seem to be arising. So if that is they go to, if she's brought that practice to Broward County, then we have certainly have a concern of the overusage of civil citation in lieu of the other, following the disciplinary matrix in other ways.
Well, I can speak to the fact that she has not communicated to myself, or I don't believe she has to Ms. Hudge or David, in reference to the practice of using civil citations. That practice has not been communicated as a desire of hers. I can speak to that. As far as when a civil citation is issued, I think the way you described it is the way it does occur at schools, that they consult with law enforcement and would typically encourage, if there was an arrestable offense and necessary, a civil citation over an arrest. David, if you would like to chime in and add any more to that as far as the history of it.
So in my role, I have not been involved with the determination of how that is, how it's determined when an infraction occurs that requires interaction with law enforcement, whether they're going to have a civil citation being offered or they're going to be offered promise. However, I think what we will have to continue to do is make sure that we are working closely with law enforcement to train and have conversations about the policy and making sure that we are following our policy. But I can't speak to, whether or not schools and individual cities are following what the guidance has been given, which is if a promise eligible infraction occurs, that promise should be the option that is offered and not the civil citation.
Colonel?
Yes, Madam President. Based on the information that I've received in the last couple of years, I concur with Mr. Watkins. I think that our deputies have been given an option to concur with the school administrators in issuing the promise program over the civil citation. However, if there is, a disagreement upon the school board members that they don't want to go that route, then the civil citation is always on the table. But it would have to meet the certain criteria, and all the elements would have to line up, and it would have to be agreed upon by the victim at the time.
Major?
I agree with everything that's been said.
Well, I know you're gonna say that. Okay.
Well, I don't like wasting people's time.
Okay, this isn't a waste of time. So what I would ask if you all would just do an audit of those civil citations to see if that is certainly something that could have been handled. We did have an issue reported, but it was Sunrise PD. It was not one of your departments. So we can make sure that practice of overusage does not or has not come to Broward County. Any questions from anyone else? Okay. What I'm going to do is, first of all, I don't know, Mr. Watkins, I don't know with the new alignment what your new role is. If you could share that with us, please.
So the role that I have been in is the Director of Equity and Diversity. So that is a role in which we address the educational mandates around African American studies, Hispanic heritage, women's history, Holocaust education, as well as providing levels of oversight to juvenile justice education programs, and also providing support to the judges with our court liaisons to help with the transition of youth who are involved in the juvenile justice system, and other diversity components. As part of the reorganizational structure, I am going to be taking on a role called diversity and school climate. And so I will continue to have some of the components of the diversity around diversity, equity, and inclusion. But I will also now take on the responsibility of the code of conduct, school discipline, expulsion, prevention, and intervention programming.
Okay. I see Colonel Holmes.
Yes, Madam President. Going back to what you just discussed about what's going on in Orange County and how they issue civil citations in the schools. I asked any of the board members or anyone here on the Zoom, if you hear of an increase in civil citation in any BSO jurisdictions, please let me know, because that's something I would have to look into to see where we're heading, and I can address it immediately. Because very often in law enforcement, new ideas and techniques sometimes slip through the cracks of commands, because certain commands within districts at the lower level, and you have frontline officers too that think they know the law better than anyone else, and they take things into their own hands. And we find out after the fact, and then we have to take action. But if anyone hears of that, please don't hesitate to let me know so it can be addressed early on. Thanks.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Obel. You're muted, sir. Still muted? Okay, thank you.
My question was from Mr. Michael Walker in regards to, you mentioned that you all are looking at other preventable measures to make sure these arrests do not take place again. What are some of those other preventable measures, and how have you all partnered with local community organizations who are who have been accustomed to assisting these different sectors and supporting preventable measures? So what are some of the steps you all are currently taking? Who are you all currently partnering with to make sure that's possible?
That's a great question, and really that's the focus of our department. And I never really liked the title of school climate and discipline. I think it should be more focused on prevention and school climate and prevention, and working to help facilitate programs that provide interventions for students prior to these actions. David and I have been working together a lot. As you just heard, he is going to be taking over this department and in charge of those types of programs, or coordinating those events next year, as he was in the past. However, some of the initiatives that we've taken place this year would be Choose Peace, Stop Violence, and that's a district-wide initiative that we're pushing out this year that has violence preventative programs to be pushed through peer social norms throughout the district through peer counseling groups. For example, changing the mindset of students as to looking into the positive instead of the negative. There's a big coordination that we're focused on improving and integrating more work with the local police organizations. Mr. Watkins has been attending the Chiefs Association meetings, and we're looking to coordinate with the local chiefs what types of programs we can collaborate with to prevent these types of actions in the schools. We also have had the BSO uptick group, where we're working on communicating messages like think before you post. A lot of issues that we've had this year revolve around threats. We just had a threat at Broward College today, and it shut down like 4 schools. And that's directly related to think before you post, or see something, say something, getting that common language that's used amongst the police force versus in the schools. We're trying to use the same language. And think before you post actually has been very effective, along with see something, say something. We have had an increase in the number of threats that have been documented in our database.
Mhm.
But I look at that as a positive, because I believe that students are now reporting incidents that they did not report before. So those types of things are going on. In addition, we've had a major uptick in use of vaping. And that's a major issue in the school district that's increasing dramatically. And we would like to collaborate with the police on that, because we think there's a lot of issues that are causing a lot of harm to children related to vaping. So our uptick has gone up quite a bit with that type of incident. I hopefully that starts to answer your question.
Madam Chair, can I add a follow-up?
Yes.
So I want to go back because, well, two things. One, I don't think you quite answered my question. But two, I want to ask, how do you all measure your social media campaigns? How do you all measure that as a success? Because that's kind of hard to do. Like, what is the measurement that's being used for that? But let me go back to my first original question. Who are you all? I understand you mentioned law enforcement. But what community organization you all are working with to make sure some of the agendas you are pushing for these preventable measures are in collaborative effort with the county, right? With those who provide services to our children day in and day out across the county. So for myself, here at Community-Based Connection, on any given day, we touch over 500 families. I could point to 400 kids alone that we touch. So how are you all working with local charitable nonprofit organization, private sector organization, to make sure these efforts that you all proposing and seeking to achieve are being done collaboratively, right? And how is that being measured overall?
Well, 2 big organizations that we work with, especially with our Choose Peace Stop Violence, is United Way and Children's Services Council. In David's shop, they do a lot of mentoring programs, and there's an unlimited number of groups that they work with. I don't know if you want to mention some of them, David, as far as the mentoring goes.
Oh, I mean, we work with a lot of organizations, South Florida Cares, Mentoring Movement, Jason Taylor, Blue Apple Poetry, Jason Taylor Foundation, Take Stock in Children, Women of Tomorrow, Big Brothers Big Sisters, North Southeastern, and a lot of local organizations. But we definitely do a lot in the mentoring space, and we do look at and provide support to fragile populations, students that can benefit by connecting with peers and loving adults who will, provide support, in that arena.
So let me ask you this.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead, Mr.
I just happened to see a comment. I guess it popped up, and I thought it was public. But one of the, on the district website, on the page Equity and Diversity, there's a long list of organizations that our department of Equity and Diversity works with, particularly around mentoring and family and community engagement.
So my question is, and I didn't sit on Matrix last year, but I can say that prior to last year, for those, I guess, frequent flyers, those kids who had gotten into trouble because something was going on and they needed more deep dive services in order to work to keep them out of the juvenile justice system. You were partnering with Children's Services Council to address specifically those issues that the traditional things did not work. Is that partnership still in effect? So if a child needed to be connected to services that had a provider that had some mental health services outside of of civil citation, because that means they're already in the system, that the district had committed to doing those referrals for, so maybe on the third incident, you realize that what you've tried has not worked. And so as a preventive measure, they would then channel those families into that services. When you say Children's Services Council, are those specific services being provided through your partnership for those children who need more than the average child? They may need, a special type of program.
The short answer is yes. And then they do a lot of work. We collaborate with them for many items, but yes, to answer your question.
So we would probably need to see the data on those. I know it's coded differently on the matrix, specifically those children that were serviced through those, and we can be able to track if those are going to have been effective. I think one of the questions is, how are you measuring outcomes? In that case, if the child was, had some issues, it's time number 2, it's getting close to 3 strikes you're out, but surely this child may have some other issues. Are we addressing it, doing enough to address the issue? So I think looking at that data would probably help us determine if something else needs to be added, or perhaps some different type of partnerships for children who have different needs.
If you don't
Yes,
mind,
Mr.
if I add to that, we do in the district-wide at all levels, we have a built-in process for students with behavioral challenges, the RTI process. So each school, when they have a child who's a frequent flyer, so to speak, or is repeatedly getting into trouble, they do get referred to the RTI team, and they meet either biweekly or monthly to review the progress of the child. And they do assign service to meet the needs of those particular children once they are referred for their particular types of incidents. So we do collect that data through our RTI process and the number of students that we're servicing with tier 2 and tier 3 type interventions, which would be these students that you're speaking about that need the more intensive remediations. So we could pull up the number of students that we're servicing with tier 3 interventions and with the types of referral programs that they are receiving.
Now, Mr. Walker, as I mentioned, I wasn't on Matrix last year, but I can say the previous term, the Matrix Committee and Code of Conduct is made up of school leaders, teachers, a couple of principals, and they had a concern about RTI not being effective because they were overloaded. The process can work if you have enough people and time and that sort of thing. So can you say definitively that you all have caught up, so to speak, and that children are being serviced in the time frame as it was originally designed?
RTI is a constant monitoring process. Well, I agree with you that it's a big job. And one of the issues was assigning it to someone at the school whose lane is RTI, because it's not always guidance, it's not always ESC, it's a school-based decision. So one of the things that I implemented this year was a actual basically like a bonus assigned to the person. They would get extra pay to take on this role. So that enabled us to pinpoint one specific person as the lead contact at every school in the district. And they got an extra bonus for being that person. So they were paid to do these extra responsibilities. That's number one. Number two, the monitoring piece is something that needs to continuously to be worked on. We are restructuring the RTI process and the team. They are being realigned with the new reorganization or the new org chart, and they're going to be going into the Office of Academics with a new supervisor and a new structure. So I do anticipate seeing some improvement as there will be the ability to have more focus specifically on RTI. So I would be honest by saying that RTI is an ongoing process. However, it is well established in the schools, but it is a big workload. So we are trying to work on that. and monitor the number of tier 2 and tier 3 students that we have at each of the schools that need behavioral interventions.
So, Mr. Walker, that was a long way of saying no, but we're working on it. That sounds like that to me.
Yeah, well, that's a middle ground. I'd say yes. So it's never, I'm not a person who will ever say anything's perfect, because I always believe we have work to do. So I do think we have work to do, and yes.
I know that you do, because I come from nothing but a bunch of school. There are teachers, and we've got some APs, and so I know that it definitely needs work. And so when the school leaders become concerned, then that's when we have to really and they have a conversation about really works. What I'd like to do. Oh, let me see if there are any other questions. What I'd like to do is I'm going to ask Dr. Cartwright to make time to come on to our next meeting, whichever one she can make, to have this conversation and make sure she is committed. One of the questions, I believe it was, I got a chance to see at least part of the video, Judge Williams asked about the new leadership's commitment to eliminating the school to prison pipeline. And I did, the person who answered, I think it was Veta, had a very eloquent answer, and it sounded really good. I'd like to hear directly from Dr. Cartwright, who said that she was committed. So in her new alignment, we could perhaps find out how what she's doing or has done how it's going to be addressed in the new leadership, because I understand she's made some significant changes in the lineup and who now will be the go-to person as we address these issues. You all have seen the numbers when it comes to arrest. You've seen that is our children, and we see civil citation, and you see that's Black and brown children. So it basically, in my view, basically says the school to prison pipeline is alive and well and thriving again in our schools. So we certainly have to address that. I think now I don't see any other questions. We can move on. Can someone give us an update on the metal detectors pilot? Is it still a pilot? Is it going to end soon? Is it going to expand? Is it a thing now? Either Mr. Watkins or Mr. Walker, if you can answer that.
David, chime in. That's out of the Safety and Security Department. I do know that they have been running a pilot program. I don't believe it's been removed, but we can get more of an update. I don't know if you have any more information, David, but I would need to talk to the new chief of school safety and security.
And who is that?
Chief Alberti.
Okay. I'm sorry, Mr. Watkins, go ahead.
No, I said I didn't have an answer for that.
Okay. If we could get that, that would be wonderful. Yes, Judge Holmes.
We had a concern, and it still is problematic. The pilot program, they selected 4 schools. And then one school called and said, add us to the pilot. So that kind of skewers or messes up the randomness. If you pick 4 randomly, seemingly problematic schools, that pilot was for them. That's like, you got all these people in a test program for cancer medicines, and then 5 people call and say, we really want to be a part, and then they add them. That messes up the whole purpose of the research, so to speak. So I would love to speak to the security Chief Alberti to find out was this kind of was it going to be scientific, or it's just we pick these schools and we'll add as many that raise their hand and say, come on. That's problematic in a pilot program because it's tests, it's a research mechanism. So we kind of skirted over that. I think Mr. Weeks brought up that question. and it made sense then, and I've given it some thought. And, so we really would love to see the numbers. And so, but we don't know how long the test is going to last, or the pilot. And who else may have volunteered this school to join in that pilot program. So I think that's important in terms of, what the assessment and the bottom line is.
I'll invite the new chief, Bertie, to
Jamie
attend as
Alberti.
well. Okay, we'll invite, because this question has been on the agenda for months and we've yet to get the answers we're seeking. Dr. Wanza did provide the names of the schools, but we don't have the other information. One of the things that when I know that our organization was called, and we were by our school board member, she wanted to know what issues we had. We wanted to make sure that the data was going to be transparent on all aspects of it. And quite frankly, that's not what we have received. Somebody on here should know when the pilot is going to end, what data they found. I mean, but we will make sure we're asking the right people going forward, and we'll certainly address that with the superintendent when she comes on. But I agree, Judge Holmes. There are, it's a concern out in the community as well. I can share with you that is certainly a concern, and particularly when there is not little to no information that's being provided when it comes to that. So we will go to the boss and see where she is on this. Stopgaps update on the stopgap at the Jack regarding civil citation eligible cases. We'll start with Colonel Holmes.
Yes, Madam President and board members. The research that I have, we've been very successful. The DOD deputies, cross-certified deputies out there have stepped up, and we haven't had any issues or concerns. However, last month there were 2 municipalities where they weren't willing to allow our deputies to issue civil citations. One was Coral Springs and the other was Plantation. The Coral Springs situation, the officer declined. So that needs to be addressed with their command staff over there. And the second one, the Guardian, I guess it was at a school, the Guardian declined. So those 2
The
issues.
Guardian?
Yeah, that's what the information that I've received. I don't know.
The Guardian, who's not the police guardian. The Guardian is my uncle who's over there that has a gun that went through the training. The Guardian does not work for the department. I mean, I'm saying, I'm not denying that somebody said the Guardian, but the Guardian does. The Guardian can't do anything unless and Mr. Walker or Mr. Watkins can tell me the Guardian's job was to guard the perimeter and not be the police and make those decisions. He is supposed to not break up fights or anything. He's supposed to be at the ready, guarding the perimeter to stop shooters. So has the Guardian's role changed, Mr. Watkins or Mr. Walker? Any idea?
Madam President, if I could add something, I'll have to do more
Please.
research, because this could be a situation where there was maybe a situation where, I just got an update on this. What they mentioned was it was the guardian, the parent who's the guardian, not the actual guardian at the school.
Okay.
It
That didn't make sense.
Yeah,
But the parent said
it was more
what?
like a domestic type of situation.
And the parent said that they didn't want the child to enter. Well, how does that have to do with the charge, though? The parent wanted the kid charged? I don't understand.
Right. The information I got, the parent is the guardian, and she was misunderstanding the whole policy and protocols as far as the issuance of the civil citation, and declined to allow for that to happen.
So what does your, going forward, what does your deputy do in a situation where you clearly have a family who just is not clear on that?
We would handle that similar to like a domestic situation. If a family member was involved in the incident with a juvenile, it disqualifies them. So therefore, our deputy can't step up and issue that citation, civil citation to the juvenile.
Ms. Gaynor, I saw your hand up.
Yeah, I think I may have raised my hand too fast, but I wanted to say that there are, there's a significant amount of times where there is a parent who's frustrated on the scene, and they may say that they're not interested in participation. But what has been done is that law enforcement will send over the citation to us. And when we get the citation and we reach out to the parent, in some cases, they've had an opportunity to kind of calm down. We're able to explain to them exactly what the program is and the ramifications, or explain to them that if it doesn't go through this process, that it will go through the formal process, and it looks very different. And a lot of times we're able to go ahead and get them to enroll because they have a better understanding of it. And they've had time to kind of not be pissed off at their kid who did something that they didn't like. So that's just for informational purposes. In cases where that may arise, those citations can come to us. And if for some reason, the case manager or the supervisor, who's also required to then we notify the law enforcement agency.
Okay.
I don't know.
So there was, yeah, you went out for a second there. So there is no opportunity for the deputy to explain it to the parent, because I think you do have people that some people just don't know what civil citation is, and they find out after the fact, and we just don't know. Clearly, if they qualify, it means that they've not been in trouble before for the most part.
Yes, Madam President, I think this is an opportunity, a situation where I think each department should be clear on how they administer the civil citation program, and make sure that their officers, just like our deputies, have a clear understanding, and they can articulate and explain that to all the parties involved. Because like you said, if a parent doesn't clearly understand the program, then the wrong decision could be made. And that could hurt the kid in the long run. But I think it's our responsibility to make sure that it's explained thoroughly from A to Z, so it doesn't slip through the cracks. No doubt about that.
Have you and Chief Evans had an opportunity to at least do a draft of the document for a potential agreement between the other agencies regarding civil citation eligible children or cases that arrive at the JAC? Meaning a case like this where you would have an agreement on file at the JAC, where if Sunrise PD, and I'm not even gonna bother to say Coral Springs, but Sunrise PD, and you get a kid there, and so the chief may have agreed, if given the opportunity, to allow you to make the decision for civil citation.
Madam President, I've been in the several of the Chief of Police Association meetings, and for the most part, a majority of the municipality chiefs have agreed, but there are a few that refuse to comply and jump on board. And those are the ones that constantly are repeat agencies that we're dealing with. I know we've been pushing for quite some time, and I'm at this point, is like, at what point will these chiefs understand the importance of this program? At what point will some of the political figures in these municipalities step up and kind of force or talk to these police chiefs and make it clear that we all should be participating in this. More has to be done on that level to open the eyes of these chiefs to get them to participate.
I agree. And to answer your question, probably when it's somebody they care about that gets popped, and then they will move heaven and earth. Major, tell us about your jail and your stopgap that I know you got in place. I know it's over there. Okay.
Yeah. They're there. They're there, making sure to do your job. They're stepping up, but we just got to get that cooperation with these municipalities to make sure they're on board with us. But the deputies are there. They're doing their job.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Victor London, what say you, Fort Lauderdale and its jail? Are you all processing juveniles through there?
Do not process juveniles through our booking facility. So we won't have any issues.
You're taking them to the jack?
If
you're taking juveniles to the jack?
If they qualify for juvenile civil citation, they don't. If they don't qualify, then they go to jack. But our booking facility does not process juveniles. It would be the individual.
Okay. That's good to know. Thank you. All right. We will go to the update on the stopgap at the clerk's office. Judge Holmes, where did you all leave off on that discussion last month?
We passed it so that we could have a meeting, and I think we met the next day with Ms. Mashala. I think Chief Evans was present, Mr. Weeks was present, Ms. Phillips was present, I was present, and Ms. Mashala was present. And so Ms. Mashala, I know you had a meeting with the clerk's office the following week after we met. So I'd like to tender the floor to Ms. Mashala so she can tell what her progress was.
Thank you, Ms. Mashala.
Yes, before I say that, Madam Chair, I just want to put you on notice that I do have to cut out about 4:15 today. So anything that you need to know with regard to the state, I'm going to ask that you get that from me before I have to leave. I have a prior commitment that I have to get to. My apologies. Yes, we did meet. I did meet with the clerk's office the following week with our executive director, Jared Brooks. Essentially, some of the things that Judge Holmes was eager and kind enough to go over with me in the meeting that we had with regard to the memorandum or the administrative order rather with Judge Tudor from last year was received exactly as I thought that it was going to be received from the clerk's office, in that administrative order addresses basically what are not in custody cases that come to the clerk's office in error that should not go to the clerk's office, that should come directly to the state attorney's office. Those cases are captured before they get any kind of an assigned case number, and they're sent to my office. With regard to arrest cases, they are not in a position to unassign case numbers to arrest cases. Their concern is that there is nothing that well, they definitely do not feel that there's anything that would give them the authority to do that, and they're not very optimistic that even if we address it with Judge Tudor and counsel for the chief judge, that they would be able to authorize that in an administrative order, but they are going to explore it. In other words, they didn't take it off the table, but I didn't feel encouraged that they felt that they were in a position to do that. They did push it back to law enforcement agencies. Some of the things that we've said many times over in these meetings, which is that it needs to start with a law enforcement agency. That's why the clerk's office doesn't feel they're in a position to do it, because if the law enforcement agencies are choosing civil citation or choosing an arrest versus civil citation, then they've already made the ball go, start rolling, and that's not something they can undo. They also mentioned that, many of the cases come through the JAC, as we all know, and we're addressing that stopgap at the assessment center, that those cases that get put into the computer are done immediately, but that would be not on the clerk's office, because that's not the intake person that administers those that information into the system. So they, basically suggested that we would have to do something at the facility that didn't involve the clerk's office. I think that would be DJJ, but we're already doing that because Ms. Evans, Chief Evans is working with Colonel Holmes to try to prevent those cases from being entered in at the JAC in just the way that we just spoke. So that's where we left it. My understanding is that the clerk's office attorney is still going to speak, counsel is still going to speak to Chief Tutor's counsel and get back with Mr. Brooks, but he doesn't anticipate that that will change.
Judge Holmes?
Well, you know what? It's just a matter of what people want to get done. I'm not sensing any motivation on either side here. Mr. Pryor stood before press conference, taking all the glory for the civil citation. But when you have a missed opportunity, then you should not do the victory dance, because one child arrested that could have received a citation is too many. The whole purpose of that, I don't know what avenue to take, but I'm certainly going to give it some thought, because I tend to get what I want legally, and their statutes and laws. We've never asked them to unarrest anybody. Did you, I don't know if they were tendered what they do in Dade County, hold it for 12 hours before you give it a case number, so somebody from the state attorney's office can make that decision. I don't know if that was there, but like I said, when I don't sense motivation on either side, that is problematic for me.
Okay. Will you then, Judge Holmes, have a conversation with the chief, another conversation with the chief judge, and see if there's anything we can salvage from the agreement? I know its original intent, and see where we are on this. Okay, and is the state attorney's office, are they, so when they're getting the civil citation cases, I know they're already in the civil citation eligible cases that went through the system. How are they handling them? How's your office handling them?
You mean the ones that come through that should have been civil citation eligible?
Correct.
Yes, we send them to the civil citation program. We salvage as many of them as we could capture, notwithstanding any speedy trial issues, but those would go to civil citation first. And then if that doesn't work, it still goes through the diversion programs.
But they still have a case number. It still indicates that they were.
Well, they'll have a case number, but ultimately it would show that they successfully completed. Again, I know this is not going to be what you want to hear, but we are not talking about, we're talking about less than probably 5 cases, if that. I mean, we're not talking about, I just don't want anybody to be under the impression that there's a lot of cases out there that are not having an opportunity at civil citation, because law enforcement agencies are really doing what we expected them to do or hope that they would do, which is to utilize civil citation. So we're not talking about a large number of cases, fortunately.
Well, it's still somebody's children, and it's still an awful thing to happen. So that's what we're concerned about. If it's 50 kids or 40 kids, that's still too many, and that's not helpful. The whole thing was to set up, our agreement was, and from the duly elected state attorney was, he was supposed to work to make sure that all the children protected. I don't know what your number is. That's okay. That's being denied, but no, it's just not okay.
Not suggesting it's okay. What I'm saying is that the way to make it work to zero is through the law enforcement agencies, because the thing that starts the ball rolling is the actual arrest. So when we can educate our law enforcement agencies down to road patrol, and I think we've done we're doing a very good job of that. We have work to do, and we continue to do that work. That's how you get rid of the number.
Okay, well, speaking of that, Gloria, since you have to go, you and Miss Gaynor, did you follow up with Coral Springs, Plantation, and Lighthouse Point regarding their internal exclusions, the issuance of civil citations? I know that you met, 7-8 months ago, or whatever it's that. Have you followed up with that in hopes of working with those agencies to do what you just said should be done.
With regard to Lighthouse Point, we have not followed up. Ms. Gaynor and I had a conversation where we have not seen any issues with Lighthouse Point. I think they took what we said to heart and have already implemented that. I haven't seen
Do
Lighthouse.
you know that for a fact? Have you
I
seen their
haven't seen
SOP?
Lighthouse Point on a missed opportunity sheet in months. So that wasn't.
But I'm
my-
saying, have you seen their SOP, and do we know for a fact that they've changed it?
I haven't seen it, no.
Okay, and Coral Springs and Plantation?
I met with Coral Springs today along with State Attorney Pryor and Deputy Chief Gina Fox. So we've met with Coral Springs Chief.
And were they in agreement to change their SOP, or are they standing firm?
They're not standing firm. They had open ears. They had a very robust conversation with us. They are utilizing their discretion. Again, most of the time, what we're seeing on these reports are having to do with batteries. They recognize that. They see those reports every month, so they're very much aware. They do use their discretion as other agencies do.
But Ms. Marcello, that was not the question. What was found, I believe, both by your office and by the county, the fact that there were internal exclusions that were preventing issuance of civil citations within their SOPs. The question was, and you said that they initially said that they would go back, take a look at it, and then consider it, make a decision. Have they gone back, reviewed it, and have they made a decision?
You're asking me whether they're going to tell me that they're going to get rid of their SOP? Is that what you're asking?
That's not what I said. No. Their SOP, their internal policy of those three agencies prevented the issuance of civil citations that were listed, that were eligible based on the program that the state attorney office developed. And so the only thing preventing civil citation in those cases was their own SOP. So you said you met with them and they agreed that they would review and reconsider, or at least have a conversation about it. And we've been asking once a month for months and months, has that conversation happened, and what was their decision to change their internal policies to to go along with the program that
I'm trying to explain
that
what
the No, so that was kind of a yes or no. Are they going to continue with their own internal exclusions? Never mind what the state attorney's civil citation program says is eligible, or are they going to yes? Are they going to change it? No, they're going to continue on.
It's not a yes or no answer, because what their response was that they're utilizing discretion. So no, I don't think it's a straight. If you're looking at the reports, you're thinking that they're always going to arrest in a battery situation. They're not always arresting in a battery.
That's not what I said. That's not what I said.
They utilize civil citation. They already utilize.
They don't do it to the full extent. I think we both know that.
I know. So what I'm trying to explain is that their response was that they do utilize their discretion in certain factual scenarios where they will not issue a civil citation, and they explain their reasons why. But they also are open to expanding the use of civil citation, even in cases like batteries, where where I encourage them to utilize civil citation by using that discretion, and they are open to doing that. They're definitely willing to consider that, so that we may see actually a reduced number, or actually a higher number, of civil citations being issued with Coral Springs. They also said that they would welcome coming to a meeting and addressing the board at a meeting, if that would be helpful to you all.
Let's get, hold on a second. Ms. Gaynor, what were the exclusions, do you recall, for those agencies?
The ones
I think one of them may have been trespassing and something like that.
I believe for Coral Springs, I know that it was battery when it involved more than one youth. I believe it may have been loitering and prowling also for Coral Springs, but don't quote me on that one. And that for Plantation, it was loitering and prowling.
So that was the question. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
I believe that's also the case for Lighthouse Point. But I wasn't involved in the meeting that took place yesterday, but from my perspective, I don't have confirmation that but that the standard operating procedures of those law enforcement agencies have changed to change the exclusions that they gave us.
So then the answer is no, unless we can verify, and they may have their SOP online. And I guess that's easy enough to go on and find that whether they changed their policies or not, as it pertains to laundering and prowling and these other things. And we can go to the video, Miss Gaynor, and we could get the exact ones that were the exclusions that were strictly because of the policy of those police departments.
And just to follow up as well, I know the last meeting where you were here, we had discussed that Coconut Creek was going to come into the office. They wanted to see the office. They wanted to meet the staff here at the civil citation location. I will let you know that that has not happened. In April, the chief was sick, and then unfortunately last month, the pandemic decided it wanted to take over our office. So it was also canceled, but it has been rescheduled for June the 23rd at 11 a.m. and it will take place at our location here.
Okay. Thank you very much. Questions? So we can look for a continuance of the same from Coral Springs, Plantation, Lighthouse Point, and Coconut Creek. So we've made no movement yet. They have the most missed opportunities, and looks like they're going to be at the top of the list based on school-based arrest, even for what we saw, and at the top of the list for missed opportunities. And you know, if we're not even addressing the fact that their policy goes against what the state attorney's office has outlined, then you know that's a problem. We can't expect things to change if we didn't. But that's what we've been waiting for, the meeting with the state attorney's office to address those issues.
Well, I was encouraged by the meeting with Coral Springs, but you can take it as any way that you want.
I'll take it the way that it was. If they haven't changed their policy as it pertains to those issues, then there's only one way to take it, Ms. Michelle.
And I would also add that most of the law enforcement agencies do not really issue civil citations when you have 2 or more kids ganging up on one youth, so on one victim. So I would say that Coral Springs is not the only agency that's not issuing civil citations for battery when you have more of several kids jumping one kid. And I've expressed that many times before, that I can understand them using that discretion.
I would like to examine, if we could, those cases, and I guess I could ask for help from John James, since they're all arrest, or whomever it is that we can get, because that Coral Springs is going to tell us that it's only black kids that's doing this. The missed opportunities, the ones that they're denying, are predominantly black and brown kids. I'm just not buying that. I'm sorry. And I would love to see exactly how many of those are several kids jumping on one kid, or how are we talking mutual combatants? I would love to see the data on that, just so we didn't have to guess about it.
Well, like I said, they welcomed coming to the meeting. So if you want to reach out to Coral Springs,
I would welcome looking at the data prior to a meeting. It doesn't make sense for them to come and tell us the same fluff that I'm hearing today. I'm talking about the policy and why they have, and we look at the data, so we will really we'll be data driven prior to having the discussion there. Mr. James, you're turning your cameras. You have a question?
No, I didn't have a question. I wanted to echo what you were saying, essentially, that yes, we can look at that information. We can pull the arrests for what we've seen to see if that is in fact the case. And then I think the thing that you have to keep in mind too is that here's what we will miss from looking at a lot of this data, is that if they don't make an arrest at all, then we have nothing to show that someone of a different race did not encounter the same problems of our African-American boys and girls. So a lot of times I think we take for granted the fact that a lot of those cases they never show their face, because then no one is never arrested, nothing ever comes from it.
That's very true. And that's our point to the whole thing. I think when we drill down, and we've seen the school-based arrests, we've seen where that is, we've seen the missed opportunities, we've seen where that is, and we see which agencies there are. And I would welcome the opportunity to drill down even further. But we definitely have a problem here. And we can dance around it all we want to. The data will not lie. I would suggest that we get that and then drill down to share with everyone what we're really talking about here when it comes to our children. What is the date of the expungement workshop? I guess it's not just juvenile, it's for everyone, Ms. Martello?
Yes, it'll include juveniles. It's July 14th at the EPAT Larkin Center from 3 to 7. We are inviting the supervisor of elections office to have somebody out there to provide information to the public, as was requested at the last meeting as well.
Okay. And there will be, so the supervisor elections will be, there are many because it's juveniles and it's going to be adults, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And so there are a number of returning citizens or ex-felons who do qualify as we sit today to register and vote. And so the supervisor, the role will be to share that information with individuals. Obviously, they are attending the workshop because something has happened, to share that information with those individuals that are attending or seeking information, so that, and if they are eligible, to register them and so they can cast their ballot in the upcoming election. The deadline is July 25th, so there's time. It's perfect timing to get folk in, get the information. Missed opportunities, Ms. Gaynor.
Madam Chair, my apologies, but I do have to take out off.
Understand.
So thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Gaynor.
I'll be able to provide you what I have, but I have the screenshot, so some of the information may be limited. This month we received we've received a report from the month of April as well as the month of May. For April, there were a total of 17. However, only 8 were eligible for our program. The other 9 were excluded because they were domestic violence related. Of all of the April cases, all of them were, looks like all of them were battery. All of them were battery. It was for April 1st through the 30th, and there were 4 from Coral Springs, 3 from Lauderhill Police Department, 2 from BSO, 2 from Davie, and 1 each from Coconut Creek, Hallandale, Hollywood, Margate, Pembroke Pines, and Sunrise.
I'm sorry, those are missed opportunities that were eligible for civil citation?
Okay, so the missed opportunity, the ones that were eligible, I shouldn't have called out those numbers because there were only 8 that were eligible, but on the screenshot, I'm not able to identify of the ones that were eligible.
Chief Evans, can you assist at all? If you would help Ms. Gaynor out, please, ma'am.
Most of them, they were battery. And I can look at April. I can't tell you for May, but for April, I can tell you that there were 2 from Coral Springs, actually 3 from Coral Springs. It looks like 1 from Coconut Creek. There were 2 from Davie. All of them were battery. So 2 from Davie, and then 1 from Hallandale and 1 from Pembroke Pines.
Okay.
That was 0 from BSO, right?
The ones for BSO, we can exclude those because those are labeled as domestic violence.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And Colonel, you will audit those and make sure they were exactly domestic violence?
Most certainly. And the commands know that we're following up on all of them too, to make sure that they're accurate.
We would feel much better if you were able to examine and say for sure that those are they.
Yep, most definitely.
Evans?
Tamika, that was for the month of April, correct?
Yeah, that's the month of April.
Okay, so for the month of May, so I want to just step back a little bit. These are first-time misdemeanor cases resulting in delinquency prosecution. So I'm not taking this from the missed opportunity report, which is different. So these cases ended up kind of moving forward. So for the full month of May's report has not been made available. So this date ranges from May 1st to May 20th. There were a total of 15 youth during that time frame who were listed on the report. 9 of those were for domestic violence. As I go by agency, Coral Springs had 3, and of those 3, 2 were for petty larceny, and the other one was for domestic violence. Plantation Police Department, I think it was, Plantation, 3 domestic violence. So they're excluded. BSO was there, but 2 domestic violence, they were excluded. Coconut Creek had 2 cases for assault and battery, not domestic violence. But this is it seems to be one of those internal policies because the reason given was ineligible offense. Hollandale had 1 domestic violence, so that's disqualified. They had 1 assault and battery, but the reason given was that it involved weapons and firearms. City of Fort Lauderdale had 1 for assault and battery as an ineligible offense. And then Lauderhill and Margate are also listed as agencies, but they were both agencies had for domestic violence. So again, that left 9 out of 15. What is that? 8?
6.
6. I can count. Right, 6. That's right. So it was just a few who had cases that were seemingly eligible on the merit of the charge, but did not fall into that, who were not offered civil citation. But Madam Chair, if I could go back to an issue that you raised earlier.
Go right ahead.
And Judge Holmes brought up the issue about law enforcement. That is, and I saw someone put in a check about discretion being such a large concept. So Colonel Holmes 2 months ago spoke to the Chiefs of Police Association regarding civil citation, these opportunities, and the philosophy that perhaps is still being used. I have since been able to be placed on the agenda for this upcoming month of the Chiefs Association with just the chiefs to have a deeper conversation regarding juvenile justice matters in its totality. To, of course, to begin with the beginning of the system all the way through the more serious, deeper in kids. And my hope is that I can assemble through an ad hoc committee, a group of officers just to sit down and discuss these issues and to determine truly what are the embedded barriers that law enforcement refuses to let go of antiquated and draconian practices, feeling that an arrest actually changes behavior. It does not have any significant outcomes that are positive. And so I am hopeful that we can get a group to the table to have some further discussion, because to Colonel Holmes' point, there is a true disconnect between the leadership and road patrol, right? And the decisions that are made where they're applying the rules of discretion. And so it is my hope just to open up some dialogue that has not taken place in almost a decade at that level, certainly between the department and law enforcement, because once a child is in the police car, it's all down here from there. And that's been Judge Holmes' key point, right? Because now you're starting with an arrest incident number. You have a series of subsequent events. So I'm hopeful that next week the chiefs will entertain my recommendation or ask for ad hoc juvenile justice committee of the Chiefs Association to allow us to delve deeper into this topic, which is something new that we haven't done. So I just wanted to share that with you, that my efforts are going to step back from trying to operationalize around missed opportunities to trying to actually extinguish missed opportunities when unless there are, again, extenuating circumstances, but certainly want to get to the law enforcement level. So I wanted to share that with you as just an action item that I've taken on in the last truly in the last year, because I've been asking for over a year for this. And I do have a meeting on next week, the 15th, with them.
Thank you, Chief. I must say that the state attorney Pryor committed to this process. When he took over, state attorney's office was not in compliance when it came to having a statutorily required civil citation program. Judge Holmes brought that to everyone's attention, and they said they went to work on it. They excluded us after a while because he reminded us he is the duly elected state attorney, and he doesn't need us. And so he did, a number of things and had a lot of several press conferences and took vows. But and what we found is these people, those agencies that we talked about earlier, are doing nothing when they're doing what they want to do. They're not going along with his recommendations or his program that is statutorily required. And we had his commitment, the commitment from the duly elected state attorney, that if for those missed opportunities those children deserved, he would not seek to go forward with those cases, that they would be handled in a different way. Putting those children in after it's too late and they've already been entered and it shows an arrest in the system is not helpful to the main thing, was to prevent them from having a record. He has not lived up to that and is not. We have been wasting our time, quite frankly, for Miss Marcella, because she says she's going to go and ask Attorney Pryor. She's going to go and ask. She comes back and she says she's going to ask. And they, quite frankly, have not done what the Pryor said he was going to do. That's so disappointing. And it's so not right for the children, certainly, of Broward County. And so we're only asking that his office, which civil citation is under the state attorney's office now, no one else could do this, but his office can lead the charge to make sure that every eligible child who gets in trouble and they are eligible for civil citation, that they be offered that civil citation, and that he work with the law enforcement agencies to make sure that that happens. He's not doing that. Marcella just told us that they didn't even address the issue of their SOPs and them changing it to go to match with the state attorney's program, simply as BSO and Fort Lauderdale did. We're not asking him to do anything but said what he promised to do when he asked everybody for their vote, quite frankly, what he said he was going to do on the campaign trail, and what he came on here on those rare occasions when he did come late and leave early to promise to do just that, to make sure that these children who are eligible for civil citation be issued that an opportunity, and that's not what's happening. And so this is not where we had hoped to be. And so we need to do everything we can. And someone mentioned, I think the colonel mentioned earlier, to talk to leadership, because obviously it's not happening from the state attorney's office. We know law enforcement, we know elected officials, we know city managers, and we know mayors. And so perhaps we need to go back to the way we were doing things before, when Sachs was in office, to make sure that those children and they're given a fair opportunity. You've seen, the last time I checked, it was like 87% of the missed opportunities were Black children. We've seen the school-based data, Senator Osgood, before you came on. It was, the school-based data showed primarily Black and brown children, Black first, of course, by far, that are being arrested. We haven't seen the suspension and expulsion data yet. So, we are asking all people at all entry points to make sure that the right decisions and fair decisions are made for all of our children. That's what we're asking for. We're not asking for anything special, but just to be treated fairly, and that the statute be followed, and that we continue on. So we are, to catch you up, Dr. Osgood, we are going to invite Dr. Cartwright. If you recall, she offered transparency. She promised transparency. She said she was in tune, supported promise. And we want her to tell us where she stands on the growth and of the school to prison pipeline in Broward County School District. We will ask for her. We're asking for, if you recall, when we talked about putting metal detectors in our schools, the pilot, we were promised there'd be transparency on that. We let them know that we would be tracking that. Well, the data is not coming forth like we had hoped that it would. Nobody knows when the pilot is going to end. Nobody knows what is happening. If any more schools are going to be added, nobody knows, but we need to know. And so we're going to not do the intermediaries and go directly to the boss and see where she is on this children, because we are certainly, Broward County is headed in the wrong direction. And any comments before we move to the juvenile justice, the detention center COVID and jail COVID? Okay, Colonel.
Yes, Madam Chair. Overall, within the jail system, the entire jail system, we have 31 positive cases. The whole jail population is at 78.9% full. Over at the juvenile side of the house, we currently have 7 juveniles in our system, 6 male, 1 female. We have 0 positive COVID cases there. And all of the juvenile inmates have access to mental health services and behavioral services. So we've been fortunate to keep that low. Wearing masks is strictly enforced. So that's been very, very helpful. As you can see, month after month, that's been very, very helpful. So it has been working.
Thank you, sir. Chief, anything you could add?
Good afternoon. As far as again, the state is no longer required to track COVID numbers, but I'm aware of no incidences of quarantine or of concern. David, you're a little closer to the operations. I know of none as of today. And as far as population is concerned, we have 46 youth in secure, 145 today. We have 46 youth in detention, 38 of them being male and 8 of them being female. And in the month of May, I'm seeing a slow increase of overall increase of arrests. And so we're up to 164 youth who were processed last month in the Juvenile Assessment Center. So it's been increasing by about 34 cases a month, 6 months. So we're not quite back to post-COVID numbers, but that's kind of what we're doing. But Madam Chair, if I could speak to the other end of the spectrum, we were speaking to civil citation, if I could speak to some of the deeper end kids.
Yes, ma'am.
So in addition to trying to tackle the issue of civil citation, of course, since the very beginning of our system, and doing better by keeping children out of the juvenile justice system, also been working extremely hard on how do we address the offenders who really make us afraid, the serious violent chronic offenders, the prolific juvenile offenders, those who have firearms and use weapons. They are a difficult population because they are young, they are spontaneous, and that together equals a dangerous environment. So I've been working with some community-based providers, more particularly with Broward County, on how do we tackle this particular cohort of children. Broward County sits at the top of the state, so it's certainly in the top 3 in both serious violent chronic offenders and prolific juvenile offenders. And so have a strong partnership already with BSO on identifying those kids, but what do we do for intervention? And Mike asked a phenomenal question as far as who in the community are we pairing up with? And so just today, I had a conversation about a very targeted approach in Broward County to help tackle young people in the system with a high emphasis, a strong emphasis on firearms and those youth who are being arrested for firearms, and thereafter those youth being arrested for weapon offenses, and then all that goes into the chronicity of those repeat offenders. And so I'm taking a hard look at that and going to be leaning towards those providers, Mike, who are deeper in on the prevention, on the intervention side out in the community, to come together. We and also working with OYC on that. But I did want to share that with the entire board that as a chief, I look at the entire system. And so working with the school board on sins fins, of course, here, and with state attorney's office and others with civil citation, but also the end of the system with the serious violent chronic offenders. And so that's been something the department has tackled, been working towards tackling, particularly in Broward County, me and my entire probation team. So I wanted to share that with you. So I may be looking at you, Madam President, to help kind of knock down some barriers as it comes to that, as we're out talking to mayors, as we look at cities who have some higher rates of the prevalence of that. So I'll let you know what the data says relates to at a city level that we can perhaps do something with.
Thank you. And I believe you have an event that's coming up.
Yes, ma'am. So wanted to get back out of the community. One of the things I've discovered is that in communities where we have high rates of delinquency, we have typically undereducation of the nuances of the system. Everyone wants to be an attorney until you really need an attorney, right? And so how they believe the juvenile justice system works. I'm going to take my case to court, and how it actually pans out are a couple different things. And so my team, along with the Faith Network, Elder Geis is on, as well as Johnny Sanders, we have started out, we're going to put together a series out in the community, and we're going to go to the people. So we're going to have probably about a 4-part series from Know the Law, Know Your Rights, to how to have an intervention, an interaction with law enforcement and survive it, and how to deal with, of course, any inappropriate law enforcement concerns, and then also connecting folks to community resources. And so on next Tuesday, the 14th, at the North Broward Campus Library, we're going to do our first kickoff event, which is Know the Law, and that will be hosted in partnership with the State Attorney's Office. Then, of course, you have the expunction workshop that will come on the 14th of July. I've already spoken with Mr. Weeks. We will then be planning the Know Your Rights, and then so on and so forth. And once we do the kind of like the North Quadrant, we're going to move throughout the county and offer that series. At this event, we hope to have about a dozen community-based providers who will also be there and will be available to offer services at that point. So my team is back out in the community, and that's our effort in 2022. We're going to do something new and different than status quo to interrupt juvenile delinquency here in Broward County.
Thank you. And I did receive your flyers, and I will be sending those out. Absolutely.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Colonel.
Madam Chair, if I can add something, I oversee our neighborhood response team, and Ms. Evans, if you want to discuss offline how we can work together, because we have an entire unit that can assist in some of these programs, I think it'd be good for us to work together and go back to the old school method of getting out, putting our boots on the ground and letting people know that there's a better way than what we're seeing now to address things and getting these weapons off the street. That's the hot topic, across the country now. And we have to step up and work together collectively to address it. So just so you know, we'll talk offline, but we're all in. I can tell you this from the top to the bottom. I know the sheriff is really into working together with our partnerships and addressing this. So let's get together on that, okay?
Absolutely, thank you. And I want to publicly thank Colonel Holmes for being our guest speaker at our recent juvenile probation officer graduation. He delivered words that were honest and authentic. First of all, I read his bio. If you've never read his bio, I learned some great things about it. Yeah, I didn't know we had a Hall of Fame. I'm just saying that, like, a person who's done some great things.
Don't embarrass me now.
I mean, he just was short of winning the Heisman. He got some skills that I just didn't know about. So I certainly want to express my public appreciation for that. And as we continue to have local academies and graduations, I will be looking to this advisory board to come in and give words of encouragement and congratulations to our graduates, because I think it's important that they see those who fight for juvenile justice matters before them, and also replicating or representing the collaboration that we have. So look out for some more invitations coming to the board.
It was a pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I only thing I would hope that as you join Chief Evans, that is not becomes a photo op. I mean, a lot of good work is done, but if you just have folk who just show up and take pictures and plaster everywhere, that kind of gets away and it lessens and cheapens the event. So that's would be my only request there. And thank you, Chief Evans. Also, I know that some of those good things you mentioned are going to be within our senator's district. So, Senator, I don't want you to come on. I know that you had a couple other things and you're dropping in, so I would love to hear from you regarding anything that we've talked about, juvenile justice issues within Broward County.
Thank you and good evening, everyone. I apologize for my tardiness. I had to pinch hit at an 8th grade graduation at Lauder Hill 6 through 12. Y'all know I love my kids. It's funny that some cuckoo people think that when you get off the school board, you're not going to still be involved with kids, but I'm going to always be involved with my babies because I love them. It's an exciting time right now with graduation. As I was leaving Lauder Hill 6 through 12, I was actually talking to the principal about 25 students that he's going to have next year in middle school, some of them that are coming from the Department of Juvenile Justice, and he's agreed to take them in. And I've asked him to help me go back to my first 3 years in the school board, where I met every Friday with the bad kids in the school. They were my kids. So I'm looking excited about that. When school start back in September, that will be my mentoring group. And I will be calling on many of you to go in as guest speakers and speak to them, only if you're going to keep it real. I think we have to continue to work. I heard you talk about the kids with the guns. It is a major problem. I'm looking on the state level at the existing law that deals and says that you should lock up your guns, to see how we can possibly do some type of education so that parents understand that. Prior to leaving the school board, a lot of the kids were saying they got the gun out of a suitcase, out of a drawer in the house, and those kind of things. I think that we definitely have to address those types of things, that we can that we have legislation that we can ask adults to follow. Also would be very interested to know if there is hate crime activity that takes place within the Department of Juvenile Justice as it relates to the LGBTQ kids, or the kids that are wearing twists and different things like that. That tends to be something that goes under the radar. I was studying hate crime legislation this week and got into a conversation about why somebody said we can't put stuff like targeting African Americans or Islamophobic or anti-Semitic, those types of things. So I'm just beginning to look and prepare for legislative session 2023. So I am very interested in sponsoring bills or filing bills that's going to help us on the state level get where we need to be. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Anything for the good of the order? Ms. Knowles, tell us a little, for those people who are new, we have in about 3 minutes, tell us what you do in your office and why it's so important that you, when you have the opportunity to, that you join us.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The Broward Legislative Delegation Office is an office that helps the Senate and House offices that are a part of Broward County, either completely a part of Broward County, or if I share them with Palm Beach and Miami-Dade. Our office also is the office for local bills that come out of Broward County. So if there's a bill that will be specific to Broward County that needs to go to the legislature, cannot be done at the local level, It has to come through our office. We hear it here first in Broward. It gets voted on, and should it pass, it goes up to Tallahassee. I do want to just make a little announcement that we're looking to do just some public policy 101 training before the November elections. So our office will have an event. It may be virtual, but open to the public to just kind of educate people on what's happening, make sure that they know that they have new districts and who their legislators may be. And I think that's about it. And session does begin March 7th, but after the November election, as many on here know, there'll be the swearing in of our new legislators, and then committee weeks will begin. So, but I'm here to help with anyone, the constituents. I work with the federal and the League of Cities as well. So I'm here, and I'm very overjoyed. Sidebar, side plug for my soror, who is one of my senators. I love having her picture on our wall here in the delegation office.
I believe Chief Evans cares a little bit about that too.
Yes, yeah. Oh, I danced past her one day at the convention. But yes, and we will also in November be electing a new chair and vice chair of the delegation after the November elections are held.
And Ms. Knowles, what's your email address on for the?
I can drop it in
I was
the
asking
chat,
for your contact information.
but it's A Knowles. If you see my name there, it's AKNOWLES at Broward.org.
Again, please.
A Knowles, AKNOWLES at Broward.org.
Thank you, ma'am. Okay. Anything else for the good of the order? Any announcements? Hearing none. This meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everyone. Really appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Mr. President.
Take care.